Well, I need to start to thank the award, thank the NAS. It's not a personal award, of course, it's a team award. I couldn't do it by myself. It's a 5-year project, and it's another deep rack, 50 meters deep. So the team earned the award, really. 15 minutes is really a short period of time. I'm not that good at English, so I hope you excuse me for my English. Dago was a British merchantman. I chose that especially for you. And he was a very common merchantman, 1,070 and 50 tons gross tonnage, 290 meters length. So it's very common. It was built in 1902 in Scotland by the Caledonian Shipbuilding and Company for one huge merchant company back then, Wilson Line. And of course, in the Second World War II, it was commissioned by the Admiralty to the war effort, and it was armed, as every ship back then. In February 1942, SS Deo left Liverpool, set to Gibraltar, integrating the OG-80 merchant convoy. It was a 30-ship with 5 military escort convoy, very common, and arrived at Gibraltar at 8th of March and was set on a solitary voyage to Lisbon when she arrived at 9th of March. She stood there till 15th of March and left to the north, heading to Leixões or Porto, more or less right there, with 300 tons of general cargo. On the morning, on the afternoon of 15th of March, the crew saw a plane, and of course they shot at them with everything on board. Fortunately, with no harm, because it was Allied plane, probably a Royal Australian Air Force from the 10th Squadron based on Mountbatten, England. But at 6 p.m., another plane came in from land, and this time it was a German plane, 4-engine great plane, Focke-Wulf 200 Condor. The plane flew over the ship a couple of times without firing, probably watching on the Lloyd's Register book to see the flag. Well, you know. It was on Portuguese waters, but anyway, it was British, so they sank it. This was the result, of course, as many on 1942, the high period of the Battle of the Atlantic. On the 2007 first surveys, we found out that on the same area where the chief officer reported the sinking, there was 2 wrecks, only 5 meters apart, both steamers. So the problem was, which wreck could correspond to the ship, if any? And everything started from there. So the problem is 2 wrecks, 1 ship. Difficulties, of course, the depth. 50 meters deep, as you heard before, with extraordinary project on Mars, is not an easy thing to do. And it's a very expensive one. And which methodology we should use in order to correlate firmly the ship with a wreck? So, for the methodology, we came up with the idea of trying to analyze 2 different aspects. One, trying to analyze engine and boilers as chronological markers. And secondly, notable structure features from the rack, comparing them with the general arrangements and the port register of the ship that we knew. Starting with the engine and the boilers. Both racks have two boilers. Fortunately, Scotch boilers. We call them Scotch boilers because they were first used in the River Clyde in Scotland, and they start to be used in 1862. So the racks couldn't be earlier. And that's good because the SS Deo was built in 1902. The problem is that both racks have Scotch boilers. So we could be. Engines, and we have one rack with a double-cylinder engine and a rack with a 3-expansion cylinder engine. Fortunately, the engines were different, because if they were the same, we still on ground zero. But with these, we have at least one rack out, because we knew that SS Deo was fitted with a 3-expansion steam engine. So we know it by the copy of certificate of British Registry. It's very clear. You can see it here. So one rack out, but there's not enough data on a correspondent engine to claim a correspondence between a ship and a rack, of course. So we need to go further. We knew by the same documents the cylinder's diameters. So we tried to measure. But the problem was that those numbers over there are from internal diameter, not external. And we cannot rack apart the engine just to take some measurements, unfortunately. So we just build a caliper ruler, big one, in inches, which is very tricky for a Portuguese. We measured. We knew that, of course, the covers, the upper covers, diameters would be bigger than the internal diameter. So we were looking for a linear deviation, and that was exactly what we found. 5 inches on every single cylinder. So, same engine, same kind of engine, right diameters, we tend to believe more and more that we have our correspondence. But we still investigate more. In order to analyze those notable features I talked to you about, we needed a scale, and the scale came from the general arrangements, because we knew that the engine room was 42 feet long. Okay, so we had the drawing, we had the engine dimension, we had our scale. We had one hatchway really well preserved on the rack. So we measured, and we identified it in the drawing, and the measurements was almost a perfect match. If we think about it, a ship that is been down there since 1942, a perfect match would be impossible, of course. So we tend to think as a correspondent. And then we thought that we have a very well-preserved rudder. And we know that ships have completely different measurements on that part. So we did the same thing, and the difference is only 8 inches. So I think it's not much for if we consider all the things that we're mentioning. And this, okay. So, regarding all the things that matches, we think that we can claim now that rack 2 is in fact SS Deo. And most importantly, that the methodology we tested and developed worked. So we are not watching all the wrecks around and try to use it and test it deeply. Okay? I think it is possible to use this kind of methodology not only when you have more than one wreck in one ship, but the opposite. When you have one wreck and a couple of ships candidates. That's exactly what we are trying to do now with the wreck 1. That we don't know which ship it is. 5 years then, later, we came up with this model, 100 scale model. It was 1 year work on a bench. It was fun. This is all what matters really. I need to acknowledge all the team, of course. All of them are divers. And this is just a glimpse of what we look like when you go down there and try to bring you up all this data. It is for me important to say that there was no funding whatsoever involved. Everyone pays for their expenses. I can't say you how much we spent in 5 years because I really don't know. I don't really want to know. My wife probably would. But, and that's it. Thank you so much.
It's very impressive. I'm sure that there are lots of questions. Mike seems to be first hand up.
You've now left us all wanting to know what you think the other wreck is. What possible suspects do you have?
Okay. One thing we done in parallel was the local area archaeological chart. You know, digging on papers, on libraries, on archives, all the ships that sunk in Peniche. Peniche is a very small village, fisherman's village, 70 kilometers north of Lisbon, where I was born, of course. And we came up with 500 ships. 30 are candidates.
30?
30, not 50. 30. Fortunately, better more than less. But the problem is, now I'm trying to establish the typology of that second wreck, okay, the wreck 1. Analyzing the same things, okay, which kind of boilers, which kind of engine, which kind of hull, which kind of anchors, which kind of structure. You know, because those things tell you a lot about the period. It's not hard to determine the terminus post kind of a rack or of a boiler or an engine. The end is almost impossible. So, but at least we have a starting point. You know. I believe that the wreck 1 is a late 19th century wreck ship built. Okay? The problem is the persistence of use. For you to have an example, in 1960 it was a Greek merchant ship who sank in the same area with a triple expansion steam engine in 1960. If we see the ship and look to the engine, you say, well, not late 19th century, beginning of the 20th century. No, it sunk in 1960. So I cannot tell you which ship it is. We are looking into it, but at least we have 30 possible candidates, all with double steam engines and with no water ballast, because the wreck does not have water ballast. Let's see, in 5 years from now.
Well, perhaps you'll get another award for that one as well.
Yeah. That was good news.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Wow, that's great. Okay, well, thank you very much. I'm going to move on.